Welcome to RidgeLife. On today's Lessons from the Ridge, I have one of my favorite stories from Daniel. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, Nebuchadnezzar, and his fiery furnace. I'm going to read Daniel 3, 8 through 30. For this reason, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. They responded and said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, is to fall down and worship the golden image. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image, which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, at that moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, very well. But if you do not worship, you will be immediately cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, and their caps, and their other clothes were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. For this reason, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. But these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, fell into the midst of the furnace blazing fire, still tied up. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up in haste. He said unto his high officials, Was it not 3 men we cast bound to the midst of the fire? They replied to the king, Certainly, O king. He said, Look, I see 4 men loosened and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the 4th is like the son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, come out, you servants of the Most High God, and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego came out of the midst of the fire. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's high officials gathered around and saw in regard to these men that the fire had no effect on their bodies. The bodies of these men, nor was the hair of their head singed, nor were their trousers damaged, nor had the smell of the fire even came upon them. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, who has set his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him. Violently the king's command, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks any offense against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced in a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego to prosper in the province of Babylon. Again, that's Daniel 3, 8 through 30. Just like this match that once it falls in, quickly burns away, so did the soldiers that were unprotected by God's hand. Here we have a match covered in ice on all four sides. We throw the match into the fire, and as you can see, it does not get consumed. We can get it closer and closer to the fire, and it stays protected. It does not ignite, it is not consumed. And then with a quick thrust, we can pull it out, and it is completely protected, unscathed. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, this match was protected on all sides by God. Nothing could harm this. And I could throw it into the fire 1,000,000 times and pull it back out, and nothing would happen to it. But just like us and our faith, we could withstand the fire. But for how long? If we start to remove ourselves from God and let our faith dwindle, it's just like this stick covered in ice that is being consumed by the fire. If you let your faith be consumed by the world, it will slowly diminish and diminish until the point at which you're consumed, just like this match will be once that ice has melted. You can see it just fell. And you will fall also into the lake of fire if you don't encourage the hand of God around you, to let it strengthen you, to protect you on all sides, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. I truly love this story. It's full of strength, courage, and faith and promise that these men who God had set apart were under orders of a king to do something that God has forbidden. And they had the strong enough faith that the fire would not consume them. And even if it did consume them, that God was still God and would bless them. Somehow, some way, even if God did not deliver them from the fire, which they had 100% faith that God would. They knew God could. They believed God would. And even if God didn't, they know that He is still the one God, the true God that could do it and has a plan for them. I sat here just a moment ago next to that fire, and it was so hot. I don't know if you saw me fidgeting. Just the fire was so hot. And one of the unique things about this story is that Nebuchadnezzar used this fire to burn people often. But on this time, for some reason, he fired it 7 times hot. And why would he do that? I believe God was doing this. God was behind this whole story. He had placed it on Nebuchadnezzar's heart that he was going to make an example, and God was going to show to the world what it means to be a true believer in Him. He had put it in Nebuchadnezzar's mind to fire it 7 times hot. 7 is the number of completeness. Throughout the Bible, you'll see 7 of this and 7 of that, and everywhere it's a blessed thing. Miracles are going to happen. You've seen the numbers 6s, and those numbers are incomplete, and they always have to do with failure or damnation. But 7 is complete. God has set up things in 7s. So when Nebuchadnezzar had that fire, that furnace, fired 7 times hot, to me, Daniel, knowing his history of God, should have been that much more encouraged that God's got this. God's behind this. I know what's happening here. He set us up in this kingdom and gave us power under a tyrant. And the tyrant allowed us to do things under God's will, not knowing He was doing it. Just like we are in this world, living under the world's command. God, has these worldly leaders doing things. And I say doing things. Their free will is making them do things. God knows how it's going to happen. He doesn't like that it's happening, but He knows how it's happening. But He knows that the followers, the people of faith, are going to do these things in His name. And He strengthens us. And he lets us get through these fiery trials. Yes, these leaders are doing some terrible things in the world, and evil is abounding everywhere. But just like Nebuchadnezzar, he had no control over what God was truly planning. So yes, there's evil that rises up and evil that does great things, and many Christians are burned, martyred in God's name. But God protected them, and somehow, I just know that God protected them somehow. But in this situation with Daniel, or in Daniel, Shadrach and Meshach and Abed-nego did not falter. They stood up and they were cast in. Now the fire being so hot, as the soldiers pushed them in, the fire was so hot they were consumed and fell in. And they were consumed immediately. Immediately. But no, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego didn't get singed. They were covered. They were encompassed on all four sides by a cloak of protection, by a hedge of protection, I should say. But then there was a fourth person in there that looked like the Son of God. And truly, I believe it was. I believe it was Jesus Christ himself, incarnate, came into that furnace and said, "My sons, you have done well to stand up in front of this tyrant, to show your faith in the Father. I am pushing back this fire. It consumes him, but it will not consume you. You will be protected on all four sides. Stand with me, fear not, and you will be protected." And they stood. Nebuchadnezzar was astounded. He's like, "What is going on here?" And he called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego out of the furnace. And Jesus just nodded and said, "Yes, go. The point has been made. You can go out." And when they came out of that furnace, Nebuchadnezzar's mind was blown. The God that they served was the true God. He knew it. That all of this golden idol stuff and all these other gods, pagan gods, was just falsehoods. That there was the one true God that could save these men from this furnace, and no other God has done that, will do that, or could do that. They were saved. And he set up a decree that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego is the one true God in that kingdom and around the world. And here we are today, telling the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. The same story, told the same way, thousands of years. And isn't it comforting to know that you can be encompassed on all four sides, just like them? We just gave the example of the match. We took a dry match, threw it into the fire, and it was instantly consumed. The phosphorus lit, and the wood disintegrated into vapor and burned away. But the match we had encompassed in ice on all four sides, we could place in the fire. And it sat there and was protected. And we grabbed it and pulled it out at our will, at our leisure. And the match inside was 100% protected. But yet at the end, I showed you that if we threw the match with the ice around it in the fire, and we let the ice slip away, be consumed, be consumed, be consumed. Eventually, it fell. And when it fell, it was consumed as well. So just like our faith, will we have the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego and be protected until it's time to come out? Or will we be like that stick with the ice around it that we let sit in the fire? As Christians, we have that ice around us. We are protected. The hedge of protection is around us. If we enter the world and let the world chip away at our ice, our faith, we'll eventually become the world and be consumed. God saves us. Once, we are saved by his grace and glory, by belief in him, forever and ever. We do not want to be under the belief that we are saved and truly haven't given our lives to him and burn up instantly like the match without protection. Because if you're not saved, you're unprotected. But even in those who are saved, that let their faith be chipped away by the world. You live a life on this earth that is not the fullest life you could live. Walking with him daily, being protected daily, fully protected. There's so much more joy in being fully protected than having to worry about, is the ice thin on this side? I'm burning on this side because the fire is so close. I get closer and closer to the fire every day, and my face starts to dwindle on this side to the point where I'm burned. And that pains lasts. It leaves scars. Getting too close to the world can leave scars. But we can turn away. We can turn away from the fire. Be protected by the faith. And live a wonderful, joyful life. As the sun fades today, and we stare at this beautiful fire, I just love the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego from Daniel. It just brings me so much joy and strength to know that those men were protected, and I will be protected. You will be protected as well. I love doing these lessons from the Ridge. I probably get way more out of it than any of you do watching it. But I hope some of you do get something out of these and appreciate them. I love y'all, and the YouTube thing, I've been doing this for 3 months, really. I just started really getting into it 3 months ago, and I've been blessed beyond measure. I've met some wonderful people, and I look forward to meeting more of you at homesteading conferences and doing things around. So continue to comment, subscribe please to our channel, hit the notification bell if it lets you. I know some people have been having issues, but again, just have a wonderful, blessed day, and go RidgeLife.